Get going in the sermon this morning. I just wanted to give a friendly reminder to all the men that we're less than 2 weeks from kicking off the next chapter of Fight Club. So I'd just encourage all the men to really give some thought to that, about participating in that 10-week chapter coming up. There's nothing magical about what Fight Club is. It's simply a group of guys getting together, seeking to live with intentionality as far as how we follow after Christ, having that permeate our lives. So, gentlemen, would just encourage you to think about that. Come to the kickoff on the 22nd. It'll be at 10 o'clock here, 10 p.m. the 22nd here at the church. You're not locked into anything just because you come check it out. So I would encourage you to do that and at least think about it if you haven't done that already. So living in the United States, quite often the United States is called a melting pot, just based upon the many different ethnicities that make up the population of our country. Really, for the last 400 years, people from all over the world have come to this country, come to this land for all sorts of different reasons. And so due to that fact, we are a country that's pretty diverse in nature. Now, I realize we don't always feel that in Eureka and Roanoke. But even then, even our ancestors came from somewhere. Okay, most of us can probably trace it back to Europe somewhere. But there's still variety in our family's country of origin, if we were to go back far enough. So there's, I guess depending on where you are in the country, the degree of diversity can fluctuate. Perhaps nowhere is ethnic diversity more clearly seen in our country than in New York City. All right, I actually read recently that only about half of New York City households speak only English. I mean, that's probably very common for here in Eureka, but in New York City, only about half of households speak only English. And the other half would also speak languages, and not like just Spanish, but languages from all over the world, really. And really, New York City can easily be considered one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world. It's pretty cool. In many ways, you can leave American culture without ever leaving America. When you're in New York City, you can go to places like Little Italy and Chinatown, Little India, Koreatown. I mean, all sorts of places within New York City you can go and not even feel like you're in American culture anymore. So New York City is just definitely a place where many different areas, different cultures all collide together in the same area. Now, the setting for this morning, for the passages of Scripture that we're going to be talking about today, you could also consider that type of area in first century Israel. Now, to be sure, there weren't the vast numbers of different ethnicities like there would be in New York City. The vast number of cultures that all come together in New York City is staggering. But even in a place like what we're going to study this morning, it was a place where different ethnicities, religions, worldviews all came together in one spot. And so that spot that we're going to look at this morning is the Sea of Galilee in Israel. It's been stated that over half of Jesus' ministry, his recorded ministry in the Gospels, took place kind of in the region of Galilee. Okay, and quite often the Sea of Galilee played either a minor or sometimes a central role in what is taking place. So as we begin this morning, you can see the map up behind me there. I want us to become a little bit more acquainted with this area in Israel, because I think if we do just a brief bit of background study on the Sea of Galilee itself, what was going on, it really brings some stuff out in the passages that we're looking at this morning. So if you can see on the screen here, you can see the orange down here on the bottom is the area of Judea, and you can see Jerusalem kind of towards the top right corner. The Dead Sea is right next to it. If you follow up, you get to the Sea of Galilee, that smaller body of water up there. And what you can see is that there are really three main areas that all converge at the Sea of Galilee. All right, the shoreline is shared by three different areas. So on the west side is Galilee. Okay, now Galilee is thoroughly Jewish. Jewish in religion, Jewish in culture. Capernaum, if you can see there, Capernaum on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, that was kind of Jesus' home base for his ministry. You might recognize some other towns in Galilee. You can see Nazareth there. That was where Jesus' family was from. You can see Cana in Galilee. That's where Jesus performed his first miracles. So, as I said, Galilee is an area that's very Jewish in religion, very Jewish in culture. It's no wonder that much of Jesus' ministry took place on this western side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you move to the northeast and come around, you can see that area is labeled Syria. Now, in Jesus' time, it was actually known as Gaulonitis. Gaulonitis, that's an area that is a mix of both Jewish and Gentile culture. So you can see even the towns that are listed here on the map. Bethsaida, that was a small predominantly Jewish town in that area. If you go up to Caesarea Philippi, that was a little bit larger, but definitely Roman town. And so within that region, you had this mix of Jew and Gentile. It's been said that it took a very skilled leader to lead that region, just because of kind of the different cultures and religious beliefs that intersected there. And then finally, if you come around to the southeast, you see that purple called the Decapolis. Okay, the Decapolis was an area that was Greek, thoroughly Greek in culture. That was an area of the world where the imperial might of Rome was on full display. Okay, and there are still ruins there today in that area that communicate that. Okay, that was an area that was very loyal to the Roman Empire in general, and also to Roman religion specifically. So you can kind of see in some ways the Sea of Galilee, right in between all those three. It's kind of this melting pot of its own in first century Israel. So that's the cultural demographics of the Sea of Galilee. It's also helpful for us to understand a little bit of the geography of the Sea of Galilee. So to do that, I've got just a quick 45-second drone video that we can see what the Sea of Galilee looks like. So Patty, if you want to go ahead and hit that. That's there. You can see it's kind of on the north side of the sea is where we are. There you go. So it tells us. Don't I sound so smart till that comes up? That's the eastern shore. That's actually today it's called the Golan Heights. So keep that in mind. All those hills on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. Okay, and also try and get a sense of how big the sea is, or how small maybe the sea is, that you can see all the way across it. Where you kind of see the break in the hills there, that's dead south. That's where the Jordan River flows out of the Sea of Galilee. And so then you can see there's hills back on this other side again. It's not a huge sea. It's like 13 miles long and about 8 miles wide. It's really not huge. On a clear day like this was, you can see all the way across it. You can see from one shore to the other. And what's interesting too is, you think about stories where Jesus got into a boat and crossed the Sea of Galilee, like we'll be talking about today. It's entirely possible to follow a boat from where it starts all the way to where it ends up. If you knew the harbors well enough, you could, they're going to that harbor, and you could, if the boat was, if it went into the wind and it was slow and making time, you could actually beat the boat there if you knew where it was going and you walked around the Sea of Galilee. So anyway, you can kind of get a picture, I guess, of what the sea looks like. Now back to those hills on the eastern shore. Because of those hills, the Golan Heights, and because the sea itself actually sits below sea level. We always think of the Dead Sea being, way below sea level, and it is. The Sea of Galilee is also 700 feet below sea level. So because of that, because of those eastern hills, it was common for violent storms to just suddenly appear on the Sea of Galilee. Now it's true that rainstorms, thunderstorms, they can form during the rainy season and cause treacherous travel on the sea. But that's not something that's unique to the Sea of Galilee, right? I mean, in those storms, they would give ample warning. You could see it in the clouds, kind of like here, you can look in the sky and say, well, there must be a storm coming. Look at those clouds in the west. You could do that on the Sea of Galilee, too, with rainstorms and thunderstorms. You could see them coming, moving from west to east. But, and this was especially true in the wintertime, there was violent windstorms that would arise off of the eastern shore, coming down off of those hills on the eastern shore. And it was not uncommon at all for sudden, strong, sustained winds to just come up and start blowing. Okay, and they would come up without any notice. All right, it wasn't like, oh, there's clouds in the sky, it's probably going to be windy today. Those windstorms would just appear. Okay, and they would disappear as quickly and as suddenly as they would appear. So when I think of stories in Scripture, in the Gospels, where Jesus is on the Sea of Galilee and a storm comes up, I usually picture dark clouds, rain, lightning, and that's how we experience storms here in central Illinois, right? That's what a storm is. All the children's Bibles that you see, that's the pictures that are painted, right? Lightning and wind and rain. But as we're going to see this morning, and the ESV, I think, correctly notes this, it was a wind storm that came up specifically. So we're not thinking rain, lightning, thunder. It got very, very windy off of those eastern hills, and bad enough that seasoned sailors and seasoned fishermen were quite worried about it. So we can kind of get a little better picture, I guess, of what's taken place here this morning. So those are sudden windstorms that just come up off of those eastern hills. So we've got our homework done, all right? We've got a little bit of a background of the demographics, the culture of the region. We've seen a picture of what the Sea of Galilee looks like. So with all that in mind, let's work our way through these passages this morning. So we're in Mark chapter 4, and I'll start in verse 35, where Larry started reading earlier. So Mark 4:35, it says this: "On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, 'Let us go across to the other side.'" And we need to stop right there, because that simple statement from Jesus sets the tone for everything that's going to take place in these next two stories. Jesus said, "Let us go across to the other side." So if you look back through chapter 4, Jesus has just finished teaching a crowd of people. Last week, Scott Andrews, he preached on the parable of the sower. And you can see there's other parables in Mark chapter 4 as well. Jesus is teaching, and presumably this is taking place near Capernaum, on the western shore, on the Jewish side of the Sea of Galilee. So Jesus has spent the day teaching a crowd that would have been thoroughly Jewish. He was teaching his own people. He was teaching people who grew up similarly to him. He was teaching people who held the Old Testament in high regard. He was teaching people who believed in and worshiped the one true God of the universe. That's the western side of the Sea of Galilee. That's where Jesus was. And so after what was probably a long, tiring day of teaching, he told his disciples, "Let's get into the boat, and we're going to go to the other side of the lake. We're going to cross over to the other side." It was time to leave the area where Jesus was very familiar with everything. He fit in very well. We're going to go to the Greek side of the lake. The side of the lake where people are not Jewish. The side of the lake where people have probably rarely read the Old Testament scriptures. The side of the lake where they most definitely did not worship the one true God of the universe. Jesus said in verse 35, when he says, "Let us go to the other side," they understood it then because they lived in it. We're removed from it, and so it could be more difficult, but that's what they're hearing. When Jesus says, "Let's go to the other side," he's saying, let's go to the other side of the lake that Jewish people usually avoid. Jewish people don't often go to that side of the lake. He's not just crossing a body of water. He is crossing a body of water, but in a way, he is crossing into a different world just by going across a small lake. a very different world. The world he's in on the western side, they worship God. The world on the eastern side, that was controlled by Satan. That was controlled by his forces of evil, as we're soon going to see in these stories. So much like different cultures kind of clashed in the region of the Sea of Galilee, we're going to see two kingdoms clashing there this morning as well. This kingdom of Jesus, he's leaving the side of the sea, in a sense, his side of the sea, and he's going to the other side. He's going to the Decapolis, the Greek side, in a way, Satan's side of the sea. And so we're going to see that confrontation that takes place. And wouldn't you know it, the boat ran into some trouble as it made its way across the sea. So look with me in verse 36. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him, and a great windstorm arose. And the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. So picture the wind coming off those eastern hills, suddenly came up very strong, waves pouring into the boat. Verse 38, but he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And when he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Now, we're not told for sure in Mark's gospel, or Matthew's, or Luke's, but I can't help but wonder if Satan had anything to do with the wind that arose at that moment, as Jesus was in the boat with his disciples, with others, crossing the sea. Jesus was intent on crossing to the Greek side of the Sea of Galilee, and I can understand why Satan would not be happy about that. So I think the question is worth asking, could Satan have had anything to do with that wind that came up? Okay, now we know clearly that Jesus can control the weather. We see him do it right here. This great windstorm that arose, Jesus stilled it in this very passage. There's numerous passages in Scripture where God is worshipped as having authority over all creation and sometimes weather patterns specifically. So we know that God has control over weather. But what about Satan? Can Satan, in his power, can he exercise control over the weather? And I think the most interesting thing to note when asking that question comes from the book of Job. And so if you remember in the opening chapters of Job, Satan requests permission to test Job. Satan thinks Job only worships God because God has blessed him. Satan says, take away the blessings, his worship is going to stop. That's what Satan thought. So God gives Satan permission to afflict Job, and Satan goes out and proceeds to take away everything in Job's life, his children included. And we're told in Job chapter 1 that his children died when a great wind came upon the house and collapsed the house on his children. So in the story, when the messenger goes back and reports that to Job, the messenger says nothing about what caused the wind. All right, just says that the wind came up and the children were in the house and they've died. So the messenger makes no guesses at the cause of the wind. But due to the fact that Satan was the one who asked permission to go out and afflict Job in this way, it doesn't seem like a stretch to attribute that wind to Satan, that he caused that to arise and collapse that house on Job's children. Now, if that's true, I don't think we can take that and say, well, man, every meteorological event that ever causes harm in my life is Satan out to get me. That's taking it too far. The question I want to ask simply is, can Satan control the weather ever? And that story in Job leads me to say, well, it seems like he did there, at least that one time. And I would say, well, if he did it once, could he have been responsible for this wind in Mark chapter 4 as well? Could Satan have been so against Jesus coming to the other side of the lake that he caused this wind to come down off the hills? I mean, we don't know. We're not told for sure. But I think it's interesting. I don't think Satan wants Jesus anywhere near the Decapolis. And so perhaps he used his power to stir up that wind, try and keep Jesus from arriving at his destination. And even if that was what happened, Jesus showed his power to be far superior, didn't he? I mean, he calmed that wind, right? The wind that quickly and powerfully arose really was calmed with just a short, simple statement. All Jesus said was peace, be still. And I love the comparison in the text, because in verse 37, we're told that a great windstorm arose. And then in at the end of verse 39, it says there was a great calm that replaced it. I love that picture that's being painted. As great, as powerful, as treacherous as that windstorm was, the calm that replaced it at the word of Jesus was great as well. Was, you could say, even more powerful. The calm was more powerful than the storm. So I love how the text kind of pulls that out for us. And then, upon this amazing display of power, the disciples recognize once again that there's something different about Jesus. Even the wind and the waves obey him, is what they say. So, I would argue that this short story in Scripture, it's just a real quick story about Jesus crossing the lake and a storm comes up and he calms it. I would argue that story is a microcosm of the grander story taking place in the universe. That God's kingdom is advancing upon the kingdom controlled by Satan. And Satan is doing whatever he can in order to stop that from happening. But just as Jesus prevailed here over the wind and the waves, God's kingdom is prevailing over Satan's. His power is not big enough to stop the advance of God's kingdom. When Jesus set his mind on crossing the lake, there was no stopping him. And I would say when God has set his mind on redeeming his creation, restoring his kingdom, there's no stopping him. Satan will not be able to stop that kingdom from advancing. So look with me at what happened so Jesus calmed the storm, and then he did arrive on that far shore in the Decapolis. So look what happened once he got there. Chapter 5, verse 1. It says, when they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he'd often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart and broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. So really, again, Jesus is faced with a powerful foe. So rather than the wind and the sea, this time it is a man possessed by and under the complete control of a demon, and not just one demon, as we're going to soon find out. The power of Satan was on display in this man. I mean, physically on display in this man. Chains and shackles could not keep him subdued. They weren't strong enough. No one could control this guy. He couldn't even control his own actions. Right? He was under such control of Satan that he regularly brought physical and emotional harm on himself. The power of Satan is evident in this man's life and how he is acting. But again, what happens when the power of Satan comes into contact with the power of God? Look at verse 6. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." So when the demon asks Jesus, what have you to do with me? That was a common phrase that maybe most literally translated means mind your own business. Jesus, you can almost hear the demon saying to Jesus, "What are you doing over here? This is not your side of the Sea of Galilee. Leave me alone. What are you doing? You're not supposed to be here. Go back home where you belong. You can almost hear that coming across in what the demon says there. But Jesus is not afraid of a single demon, no matter how powerful it might be being displayed in this guy's life. And even when the stakes are raised, Jesus still doesn't back down. Look at verse 9. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So not only is legion a military term, which kind of adds to the picture of this battle taking place between two kingdoms, but a legion was a group of 4,000 to 6,000 soldiers in the Roman army. So there isn't just one demon possessing this man. There is a whole host of demons possessing this poor man. Now, I don't know if we should read into the term and say, well, there's 4,000 to 6,000 demons in this guy. I don't know that. But I do know we are meant to understand that there are many demons in this guy. There are many demons who are confronting Jesus, and he's quite outnumbered, right? It's one Jesus against whatever the large number is of demons. But again, even with the scales tipped so heavily in terms of numbers, what we see in the following verses is that both Jesus and the demons are quite clear on who is in control in the situation. Look at the response. Verse 10, he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank and into the sea and drowned in the sea. So you would think if there was one person facing, however many large number of demons, if one side was begging and the other side was giving permission, logic would say the group would be the one giving permission to the individual who was begging. And that's not what happens here. The man possessed by this legion of demons is the one begging, and Jesus is the one that gives the permission. It is clear who possesses the power in this story. There's no question about it. Jesus' power over Satan is on full display. Even on that side of the sea, Jesus, it's not home field advantage for him right here. He's on the Greek, the Roman side of the sea, and he still holds all the power. The demons still have to come to him and beg him for permission to be sent into that herd of pigs. And then listen to the responses of so many different people in that story. Verse 14 says, the herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who'd been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. So there were those who responded to Jesus' display of power with fear, with discontent. The townspeople weren't happy that such a large herd of pigs had been destroyed. That was a financial loss for them from this miracle that had taken place. So they weren't happy about it. The people were frightened by the fact that this guy was suddenly in his right mind. He was probably notorious for being able to break out of chains. I think that would be something that word would get around. And here he is, you just get this picture of him calm, cool, collected. He's in his right mind. And it scares them. It's like, man, they've never seen that kind of power before. Obviously, that power was greater than what was possessing this man. But what I really want to focus on is the response of the formerly demon-possessed man. So when Jesus was getting into the boat to leave, this guy comes up and begs Jesus to go with him. Jesus, in essence, he's asking to follow Jesus, which is a theme we've probably picked up on to this point in Mark. It seems like Jesus' MO is to call people to come follow him. He's been doing that so far in the passage. And here this guy is, it's like he's asking to do the very thing that Jesus was calling others to do. And what does Jesus tell him? No, you can't get in the boat with me. Boy, that's interesting, isn't it? Is Jesus really telling this guy, no, you can't follow me? I mean, I realize that this is the Greek side of the lake and that he's not a Jew, but really? I mean, Jesus, you telling him he can't? I would say Jesus is telling him, you can't get into the boat with me, but he's not telling him you can't follow me. In fact, I think what he's telling this guy is following me for you looks different than for these other guys who came with me in the boat. I think what Jesus tells this guy is if you're going to follow me, go home and tell your friends. Go home and tell those who need to hear about who I am. Following Jesus for that man didn't look like going to the Jewish side of the sea where Jesus was going to go back to. Following Jesus for that guy meant going to his own people on the eastern side and proclaiming who God was, proclaiming what Jesus has done in his life. And he did that, and everyone marveled at it. It doesn't tell us whether or not they accepted it and believed it, but at the very least, they marveled at the power displayed by Jesus. So the question is, kind of getting back to the theme of the series, what do these two scenes, set against the backdrop of the Sea of Galilee, what do they tell us about why we ought to follow Jesus and how we ought to follow Jesus? Because those are our two questions. I think as for the why, we follow Jesus because he's powerful overall. I mean, we see that clearly in these two stories, his power over creation, his power over evil spirits. And so if it truly was Satan who was behind the windstorm that came up on the lake, then Jesus' power was twice shown to be greater than Satan's. For sure once with the demons, but potentially twice when you consider that storm. Satan and the evil spirits working in the world here, then and now, they're not inconsequential, okay? They do possess power, but even so, it is clear that the one who is in us is greater than the one who is in the world. I mean, there's no question about it. Jesus went 2 rounds with Satan and firmly defeated him both times. So when we put our faith, when we put our hope in Jesus and his power, what do we have to fear? And what do we have to fear? The song we're going to sing a little bit later, when our God is for us, who can be against us? I mean, this power was so clear on display. Satan can try to be against us, but he's up against something bigger than himself. He's up against a power that he cannot defeat, as we've seen here. Now, his power, Satan's power, is real. The windstorm that came up on the lake, that was a real thing. The man possessed by demons, I mean, there was real power being shown there, breaking chains and shackles. And if we attempt to confront that power on our own, apart from God, then I think we're just going to end up like the disciples, frightened in the boat, or the people on that side of the lake that say, we got to stay away from this guy out in the tombs because we can't handle that. If we try to confront that power on our own, then we probably are destined to be defeated. But it's not on our own. If we trust in Jesus, if we put our faith in Jesus, and then nothing that Satan throws at us will be able to defeat us. His power cannot overcome God. So through Jesus, through his power, we do find victory. I would say that's why we follow Jesus. That's why. And to be totally honest, the why this morning kind of gives me warm, fuzzy feelings. Like, man, that's great. That's great that kind of power through Jesus is protecting me, is leading me, is guiding me. I love the why. The how this morning leads to some discomfort, for sure. And I think if we're honest, the how this morning is kind of scary as well. Because if we're going to follow Jesus, according to the story this morning, where are we going to go? If we're going to follow Jesus, then we're going to go to the other side of the lake. We're going to follow him there. I mean, Jesus made a determined effort to cross from the Jewish side to the Gentile side of the lake. He purposefully went to those who thought differently than he did, to those who believed differently than he did, to those who acted differently than he did. He purposefully went to a place where he was not welcomed with open arms. And the journey to get there wasn't, pardon the pun, it wasn't smooth sailing, right? I mean, the journey to get there even was difficult. I mean, man, whether Satan was behind that storm or not, Jesus had to overcome that obstacle in order to reach the other side. And then even when he got there, he faced opposition from Satan. This man from the tombs immediately came out to confront him. So basically what it comes down to is that Jesus didn't come to the earth to be the Messiah only for the Jews. I mean, he came to be the Messiah for all people. Not just the Jews on the western side, but the Gentiles on the eastern side of the lake as well. And so he went to them. He got on the boat and he made the decision to cross. And he took the gospel, he took himself to them. So I want us to look in our bulletin, or you can see it up on the screen behind me here. Number 4, the question. Where is my other side of the lake? Where is my other side of the lake? Right? Where's that place in my life that people think differently than I do, act differently than I do, believe differently than I do? The place that I maybe don't visit real often. And don't just think about it this morning. If you got something to write with, write the answer to that question in your bulletin. Where is the other side of the lake in my life? If we were to follow Jesus, where is he going to be taking us that's like that, right? Where we're going to get in the boat and follow him to a place that's probably uncomfortable for us, probably a place where God is not worshiped like we think he should be, where Scripture is not upheld like we think it should be. And really, as I was thinking about this, there's 2 groups of people that I really want to say something specific to this morning. First, to those who are feeling like God might be calling you to literally leave this country and go take the gospel to the ends of the earth, I want to say something to you first. That might be a student who's kind of sensing maybe that's what God has for me in the future, to serve him as a missionary overseas. It might be an adult who's felt that call for decades maybe and not acted on it. If God's calling you to follow him to a foreign country, even halfway across the world, go. Go. I mean, get in the boat and go. I mean, God's power is unrivaled. There's nothing that Satan can throw at you that is going to defeat you when you go in God's power. A sudden powerful windstorm's not going to stop you. A crazy, strong, demon-possessed man on the far shore isn't going to stop you. God is determined that his kingdom is going to come, that he is going to overthrow the kingdom of Satan, and it's already happening on this earth. And when God says, I want you to go to this spot and through me working through you, my kingdom will come there. If God leads in that way, then go. When God calls you to go to another part of the world, you can rest calmly in his leading. Remember, Jesus was sleeping in the boat. I mean, he knew he was going in God's power. He knew there was no reason to fear. He fell asleep during a windstorm that had the disciples thinking they were going to die. I mean, I get it. Jesus was probably tired, but that's not just physical exhaustion. There's an inner calm and an inner peace there that he felt that was only because he knew God was leading him there. And he knew that in God's power, Satan could do nothing about that, could not stop him. So if you're sensing God calling you somewhere internationally, wherever it might be, go. I know there's a lot of details. I know there's a lot of things to work out, but go, and God will take care of it. And then secondly, to those of us who can literally see the other side of the lake from our daily life. I mean, remember the Sea of Galilee. Every day, if the Jews wanted to, they could go to the shore of the Sea of Galilee on their side and look to the other side. They could see the other side. Maybe you could even see people walking on the other side. I don't know if it was quite that clear, but they could see the other place, the other side from where they were each and every day. for a lot of us, where God is calling us isn't that far away. It is not that far away. The other side of the lake might literally be the neighbor on the other side of the street. The other side of the lake might be the lunch table next to the one that we normally sit. It might be the coworker just on the other side of the office. The other side of the lake might be the family member that you really hoped I wouldn't bring up right now, right? I mean, for many of us, the other side of the lake isn't very far, just like it was here in this story. And so, are we willing to purposefully get in the boat and go over there, take the gospel to the other side? We're not called to sit on the shore and wait for them to come to us. I mean, that's not our calling. We're given the Great Commission, and it's like, how many times can Jesus say it? Go. Go into the world. Go to the other side of the lake. The journey's not easy, right? I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. I'm not saying the outcome will be entirely pleasant, and we've already seen what Jesus faced when he crossed the lake. And honestly, Satan's not going to like us infringing on his territory. Probably going to do whatever he can to try to stop us. But we've seen the power of Jesus, right? I mean, we've seen it on full display this morning. If we follow him to the other side of the lake in our life, his power is right there with us. He goes with us. Satan will not be able to stop us, to defeat us in that endeavor. We'll have everything that we need at our disposal because we have Christ with us. So I guess I can say with confidence that if I am truly going to follow Jesus, then there's going to be times where I'm crossing the lake, where I'm going to take the gospel to those who believe differently than I do, think differently than I do, act differently than I do, whatever the case might be. We're going to cross the lake. So, I guess there's two questions we ought to ask. One, where is the other side of the lake in my life? But then once we get the answer to that question, the next one is, are we going to go? Are we going to get in that boat and go? Take the gospel to that side, again, whatever it might be. Following Jesus is not, it's not supposed to be the easiest thing we ever do. It's not supposed to be the most comfortable thing that we ever do. But it is what we are called to do. And what's great is that Jesus' power is present through all of that. There's nothing that we have to fear. That he is in control of each and every situation, not just where we currently are, but even where he's calling us to. His power plays on the other side of the lake, just like it does on our normal, everyday side of the lake. So would you stand with me, and we'll close in prayer, and then continue to worship this God who's not just powerful, but calls us to participate in what he's doing. God, I thank you for this story this morning. I thank you for your love and your compassion, your desire to see all people saved. Because to be completely honest, God, we're not Jews. We're Gentiles. We're the people on the other side of the lake. And had you not gone there, then what does that mean for us? And so, God, I thank you that you do love and care for all people, and that because of that we are forgiven, we are redeemed, we are brought into your family. God, may we never forget which side of the lake we're from. And God, in our life, as we seek to follow after you, I thank you for your power. I thank you for that power that's not just some abstract thing out there somewhere, but that it's here present in our lives as you dwell with us. And so we praise you for that. And God, I thank you in advance for what you will do as we follow you, as we go to that other side of the lake. God, prepare us. Prepare those whom you're sending us to. God, I pray that in our lives here that your kingdom would be advanced, that the gospel would be proclaimed, and that there would just be incredible redemption that takes place. God, I thank you for this high calling that you've placed on us. For myself and for all of us, God, would you compel us to go? Dare I even say, make our lives miserable when we're not following you like we should be. God, we give you praise as we close our time worshiping you through song. Would you impress on our hearts your love for us, your power through us, and your calling on us? It's in your name that we pray. Amen.